Good afternoon and welcome to the live session of Smart Metering, Adopt, Accelerate and Transform, powered by Thales Group, presented by Acceleron Software. On behalf of organizers ITIN Media and Clarion Energy and co-organizers Energy Efficiency Services Limited, I thank you all for joining us today and also for your continued support for our digital initiatives. The recent pandemic is still a cause of concern, and it is going to be in our lives for a year or two, as predicted by the medical experts and researchers. The pandemic has not just affected the worldwide health and medical system, but it has also impacted the economies, trade, businesses, livelihoods, and survival in some cases. Given the situation, the need of the hour is to avoid the human contacts from the outside world into our surroundings. At the same time, DISCOMs are incurring the revenue losses due to inefficient billing, and pandemic has further worsened the situations as they are not able to take the meter readings and bill the customers. It's a time where smart solution needs to be realized as the way forward to survive in a world which is unprecedented. Today, in discussion with panel of experts in smart and sustainable solutions in smart metering space, we will discuss the adoption strategy of smart meters and the possibilities of holistic transformation of power system with the deployment of smart meters. These smart meters are beneficial for DISCOMs, but at the same time has to be consumer-centric. To start with, I am very glad to invite you, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Managing Director, Energy Efficiency Services Limited. Mr. Kumar is an internationally recognized authority on design and implementation of scalable, replicable, and impactful business model for promoting energy efficiency across the sectors. Under his leadership, EESL has implemented the globally lauded Unnati Jyoti by Affordable LEDs for All program and Street Light National program. Mr. Kumar and his team has also been successfully implementing the several demand-side measures, including municipal functions, agriculture, public buildings, and transformation initiatives like e-mobility, smart meters, tri-generation, and decentralized solar power plants. I welcome him and invite him to deliver the opening address and also request him to take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Harmandeep Kaur. Let me first thank the India Digital TV for putting together this webinar, which, if you look at the topic, smart metering, adopt, accelerate, and transform, is nothing can be a better way to really summarize what this whole thing could do, not just in a country like India, but virtually everywhere else wherever smart meters have not been installed. So why smart meters? I mean, what is so great about smart meters that we now need this more than ever before? Okay, let me start by saying why we started off our smart meter national program, and it has now become a part of the national agenda, and moving forward, you will see that the tariff policy that is issued by the government of India, which actually becomes mandatory for every state government and regulatory commissions to take note of, will include smart prepaid metering as an essential element of it. So why is it happening? India as a country sells nearly 1,300 billion kilowatt hours of electricity every single year. The collection, the billing efficiency average, and these are figures I'm taking from Government of India, the Central Electricity Authority, is 83%, which means 17% of energy that is sold is never billed. Just imagine what that 17% looks like. It's about 200 billion kilowatt hours. per year. Take an average cost of power in this country to be about 8 cents, 8 US cents. We are talking about 14 to 15 billion dollars of energy which was never built. So there's no question of collection. Now, is it possible for the sector to really move forward? And those of us who have followed the pandemic and the response of the government, the package reform, the financial package that has been unveiled by Government of India is actually lesser than the amount of energy that is never built in this country. What is the solution? There are 250 million consumers in the country. Is it possible to do things manually? Absolutely not. Perhaps we have gone past that age and stage in this in development of the power sector. So what is the only answer? The only answer is smart metering, and later on integrating it into a smart grid. Now let's look at why should a distribution company do 100% smart metering. Well, the answer to me is very clear. And there is a small utility in Delhi, the New Delhi Municipal Corporation, which manages electricity in the central Delhi part of the Delhi. Has about 55,000 consumers, not too much. We were proud to do the first project where we made this utility 100% on smart meters. Three things that have come up. Number one, their average increase in billing per consumer per month has gone up by 20%. Now that's a significant number, given the fact that A, it's a small utility. It already had a billing efficiency of 99% or more. So that's my second point. Utilities were still thinking and saying that my billing efficiency is very high. Here is the example of New Delhi Municipal Corporation. 20% rise. Why? Because the quality of billing is always a suspect. You don't know whether you are billing the actual consumption or not. The third thing, during the pandemic, and I'm a consumer in this utility, I have got bills through emails. I've got bills which are actually based on my usage, and I paid them during this time. Look at the other utilities in Delhi. They have been clamoring, they have been requesting consumers to go and click a photograph. And by the way, the other three distribution companies in Delhi are private utilities. They are not government owned, which is the case with New Delhi Municipal Corporation. They have been requesting through press and media, through advertisements, to go and click a photograph of the meter and do a self-assessment and pay up. So what it has shown, A, it is far more efficient. It is far more correct. It is very transparent. And that is my second point, which I wanted to mention, is that if you look at the power sector over the last 1 century, consumer has never been the central point of focus. We never knew why the electricity voltage is low. No one told us why at times there are some power cuts, and when is the electricity going to come in. So here, we developed a mobile application. All consumers can actually see the real-time billing data, many other things that you can pass on to them. So the thing is, yes, there are challenges. There is no doubt about that. And one of the challenges, certainly apart from the mindset change that possibly will happen after the government directives are in place, but most importantly is integration of whatever data is coming through to the legacy systems. Of course, a lot of capacity building work has to go on. A lot of hand-holding support needs to be taken up for the utilities. And also, wherever this has happened, and as we move ahead, and I'm sure we'll get more responses from it in a state, Uttar Pradesh, wherever we have implemented smart meters where the penetration is more than 80%, dramatic reduction in losses have been seen. So anyway, with this opening remark, let me mention two things before I move ahead and introduce a very distinguished set of panelists, not just from India but from outside. The first thing, right out of my introduction, we will run a poll for 20 seconds, which the organizers will put up. I request everyone who has joined us today to please participate in the poll, because that will also help us shape the discussions after the opening remarks of the panelists. Number two, I regret to inform that Mr. O.P. Dikshit, Director Operations of PUVVNL, which is a utility in UP, and which we work very closely with them together, is unfortunately unable to join us because of a emergency situation beyond his control. So I apologize on this behalf, and we will make sure whatever we had questions for them, we will try and allocate this to the other panelists. So with this, it's my proud privilege really to introduce the distinguished panel that we have put together today, starting with Mr. Anil Rawal, who is the Chief Executive Officer of IntelliSmart Infrastructure Private Limited, which is a joint venture of ESL and NIF. Mr. Rawal has an experience of over 23 years in the government. He was part of the Indian Civil Services, and then he moved over to the private sector and has done brilliantly well. We are very glad that he has joined us in the new role. He has graduated from IIM Ahmedabad and Georgetown University in the Washington, D.C., and has pursued a corporate career for the last 12 years. And we welcome Mr. Rawal to this webinar. Next, it's my turn to introduce Mr. Brian Spear, Managing Director, Asia Pacific Trillion Networks. Brian moved to Singapore from the US in 2012 to really establish the Asia Pacific business for Trillion. He has worked closely as a trusted advisor with major private and government entities in the energy and smart city sectors in North America and Asia Pacific for over 20 years. His passion is developing close partnerships with clients to simplify complex solutions to solve unique problems and create long-term value. And honestly speaking, ESL and me are basically, we completely validate what the profile of Brian, because we have been greatly helped by Brian and his team in this journey. Let me now turn to Mr. Francis D'Souza. He is the Vice President, Strategy and Marketing Sales Group, and has been engaged with utilities, head-end systems, and smart meter vendors around the world, helping implement strategies that make their cellular smart metering rollout successful while ensuring security, return on investment, and minimizing total cost of ownership. He is responsible for sales, market-leading cellular communication, security and analytics technology, and expertise to implement successful digital transformation strategies. Welcome, Mr. D'Souza. And lastly, but certainly not the least, is Mr. Vasudhar Podapatti. He's the head India operations Acceleron software, and he has been passionate about building technology that helps in empowering people. In his 7-year association with his current employer, he has built development and a research team there. And before this, he worked for many B2B and B2C product and services firms. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from University of Madras, and then studied global business management from IIM Calcutta. Welcome, Mr. Vasudha. And I really look forward to an engaging discussion with all of you on this very important topic. But before we get there, I have another announcement to make, that a recording of today's discussion will be available to everyone on smart-energy.com. Let me repeat, smart-energy.com. And of course, if you have a question to any one of our panelists, please send it through the Ask Staff a Question box on the right-hand side of the screen. We would certainly like to respond to as many questions as we possibly can. And I'll make sure that we will also answer all questions that come up our way during this webinar. But before I begin the discussion, let me request the organizers to kindly put out a poll. This poll will run for 20 seconds, and we'll come back to the results thereafter. So the poll is right here. An important factor for success of smart meter deployment under Smart Meter National Program will be, and you can select any one of them. Okay, thank you. Now let me turn to Mr. Anil Rawal, and we'll get back on the outcome to the poll very shortly. Anil, wanted to ask you about IntelliSmart and what are your plans moving forward, gearing up to a very large market that seems to be coming ESL and IntelliSmart's way, and what are the challenges that you faced in the journey so far, and what could you do better as we come along? Anil.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. And first of all, I want to say thanks a lot to the organizers. Frankly, I'll just take half a minute, not replying to the exact question, but sharing some other thought, which is very interesting. You know, webinars for me in past have been something which comes to you in mailbox and you tend to delete it. But then let me tell you that the world has really changed in recent times. Webinars are the real big source of communication, connecting thoroughly well, thoroughly deep, sharing thoughts most efficiently, and really brainstorming to the depth of the issue. So that's where it has changed my context about webinars and my perception. And that's where people say that time is the biggest event in any history. So this time, unfortunate time for sure, but then it has its own lessons, and that's where I want to say thanks to organizers for having me. So coming to the question, frankly, as very well brought out by Saurabhji, that we have a problem at hand in terms of the most critical part of the power value chain not doing very well, and that is distribution. So if we look across the power value chain, ultimately who pays for all the activities? There's a single pay master, and that is distribution. And it been doing very well? Not. There are requirements of looking forward to the operational efficiencies, financial efficiencies, and that's where a lot of effort is consistently being done over the years, and these efforts have only been accelerated in recent sometimes. So that's where the smart metering becomes very relevant in this context, and that actually underlines why IntelliSmart. So IntelliSmart is a joint venture with the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, which is a Government of India sovereign fund, and EESL. And both the organizations are top-notch organizations as the info sector is concerned. So the two organizations have come together to really empower and accelerate the process of working on the distribution sector through smart metering program. And IntelliSmart's aim is to roll out, ramp up, and reach out every segment of the sector, distribution sector, to really empower not only the sector, but starting from consumer. I frankly see smart meter as an empowerment tool. Right? It empowers consumer, it empowers distribution companies, and it empowers society. I don't want to jump to too many things and probably go by the sequence which Mr. Kumar has. But to coming back to IntelliSmart, so IntelliSmart task and target and goal and mission is very clear: to go home having full capacity of competence in terms of skill set, the financial wherewithal, and a clear business model which can enable the rolling out of 25 crore meters in this country, in all the nooks and corners of the country, bringing in the efficiency which Mr. Kumar just spoke about, as brought out the total cost of smart metering gets recovered in single year of operations of the DISCOMs. If we assume that it can really happen across the country in one go, but then if that is the situation, then the whole business model has to be in a manner which can enable the ramp up seamlessly. So the issues are not in terms of financing. Issues are not in terms of technology also that much. Issues are to really implement at this large. And that's where IntelliSmart is targeting itself to be in. And means that I want to underline as a key purpose of existence of IntelliSmart.
Thank you, Anil. I think on a lighter note, the new normal that you talked about, when I first looked at the screen, all of us, including me, without a mask, that was a shock because you don't get to see people without wearing a mask. So certainly, it's a new normal that has brought us in with this pandemic has brought us. But I really agree that it is an empowerment tool, which is absolutely, which cuts across stakeholders. And we are very glad to see that IntelliSmart is using these things to bring in the necessary scale that is needed to really do a big pie of the 250 million meters. And of course, as you also mentioned, that it pays for itself as far as the utilities are concerned. So I'll come back to you, Anil, on this. Let me turn to Mr. D'Souza. Mr. D'Souza, what are the opportunities and challenges faced in other countries when they use GPRS or now NB-IoT technology?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Francis D'Souza, and I work for Thales. And Thales is a company that's present in sensing, communication, and analytics technology, underpinned with digital security and cybersecurity for mission-critical sectors, specifically aerospace, defense, and mission-critical industries. We have 1,600 people in India and 85,000 around the world, and big development centers in Delhi, NCR, and Bangalore. And because we're present in mission-critical infrastructure, we're quite involved in a lot of the smart metering rollouts, typically around resilient cellular communication. And the challenges faced very often by utilities when they roll it out is there is a gap between the life cycle of a smart meter, which is 10 to 15 years, and the life cycle of software and telecom technology, which tends to be a lot shorter. So for example, in the past 10 years in India, we've been to 2G, 3G, 4G, and we're speaking of 5G, whereas a smart meter typically would be there 8 to 10 years. So the first challenge is, how do I ensure when I build out this infrastructure that it is remotely updatable and securely updatable? So that's the first one. The second challenge that comes about is about flexibility, because a smart meter is fixed and you have a lot of changes in market conditions among telecom operators, among telecom networks themselves. So how does, for example, if you have coverage in an area and suddenly the base station goes down, how do you ensure that resilience with that smart meter to be able to get the data you need? If you're having DISCOMs in different states and each state has a selected, let's say, communication provider, or IntelliSmart has a different communication provider per state for coverage, how does that ensure that that doesn't explode the logistics cost in managing it? And that challenge has been faced in a lot of other rollouts as well. And utilities are solving it using eSIMs. So eSIMs are SIMs that can be actually programmed at the moment of installation of meter and can be changed. You can change your carrier during the life cycle of the meter. So this is the second point. So the first point is connecting communication systems that can be remotely and securely updatable. The second point is having a communication carriers themselves being able to be updatable and having it implemented at the last phase. But all of this is moot if it isn't covered with a layer of security. And in fact, because this is mission critical infrastructure, there's a lot of malicious actors going after smart grids around the world. And there's been a recent study that's been done that between 7 and 15% of smart meters, if they're hacked, can bring down the smart metering grid in a country. Now, that's not to say that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to just take in place the right security by design principles to ensure this smart metering rollout is done securely. And this is the third challenge that utilities face, and they're managing it by having security by design principles, key management systems, and also very importantly, being able to update keys, identities, software over the air. So resilient cellular communication, eSIMs for flexibility and security to protect the whole grid and make it worth the investment.
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza. Important points: resilience, flexibility, and most importantly, security of. And I'll come back to that because there has been a raging debate in this country on the communication technology which one to use. Obviously, the candidates are RF and GPRS, including NB-IoT into. But we'll come back to this discussion. But let me now turn to Brian. Brian, welcome once again. Let me ask you, and just tell everyone who is present there, the kind of capabilities that Brilliant possesses and how working with ESL, what are the learnings and observations and challenges that you faced, and what do you plan to do, maybe working with Anil together and other to scale up to the ambition that is being asked for? Brian.
Sure, Mr. Saurabh, thank you. Thank you for moderating the panel today and providing your valuable insight as always. So Trilliant's a connectivity company. So we provide the communications platform that connects a variety of smart metering, smart city, and IoT devices. We've had the pleasure of working with ESL and our other partners on this smart metering deployment in India over the past 1.5 years. And what we do, the role that we play in the project is we take the data from the smart meters, we put advanced analytics on that data on a real-time basis across millions of devices. We turn that data into information and transmit it upstreams to various upstream systems to support critical business operations. And this helps make possible some of the savings that Mr. Saurabh has mentioned in this webinar and also publicly around the reduction in losses of around 30%, the increase in revenue of around 20%, and also increased customer service. So that's the role that we play. I think the challenge that we've seen so far in the project has been just the massive scale and the tight timeline. We came into the project a little bit late, and within 1 month we had 100,000 customers that were billing, and within 12 months we had 1 million. So there's nothing that we've ever seen like that before. So that's, I think, has been the biggest challenge that we've seen. And I think ESL is looking and IntelliSmart are looking at ways on how do you set up and able to enable yourselves to be able to scale up rapidly in the future. And one of the ways of doing that is some standardization in some areas. I think you look at both ends of it. In one side of the equation, you want to be able to standardize the hardware so that you can have multiple options and you can somewhat commoditize the hardware, the meter vendors, and have multiple options and improve the security of supply and reduce the cost. And then on the software side, I think there's some value in standardization from simplifying and minimizing the integrations that are required. The integrations are very complex and time consuming, so you want to minimize that. And that will, in effect, it will allow faster deployments, less complexity, lower cost to be able to operate those systems over time, and ultimately will result in an increased ROI, which should allow DISCOMs to adopt this at a faster pace.
Thank you, Brian. I think, you rightly mentioned the challenges, which also present the opportunity. Yes, we ramped up both of us, ESL and Brilliant, together from nearly 10 times in 12 months, but the kind of learnings that came through that rollout process will certainly help in a faster rollout. So I'll come back to again many issues that came up during that, and also the other experiences that Brilliant has in doing very large such projects around the world. But let me at this point in time go to Mr. Vasudhar Bodapati, who is the head India operations. So would you like to, I mean, given that, as I mentioned, India has been talking about prepaid smart metering 100% by 2022, 23, next 2 or 3 years. Can you share your experiences and expertise in using prepaid systems around the world, and how do you integrate this with the legacy billing systems that the distribution companies have? Mr. Vasudhar. I think you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I think I clicked it twice. Thank you so much, Mr. Saurabh Kumar and Anil Rawal and Brian and Francis for setting the stage. You actually touched on the points that I want to emphasize on. One is bringing the awareness and bringing the efficiency in collections that Mr. Saurabh Kumar has mentioned. And with respect to Mr. Anil Rawal, he emphasized on bringing the value chain and making the end consumer more aware of how much they are consuming and how we are going to generate money, because we have to address two aspects here. One is technical aspect, and second is people aspect. And when you're talking about people aspect, there is a psychological aspect which is behavioral driven, and financial aspect in terms of affordability. So this particular way of us solving the problem using the technology is where our integration aspects come into play. So when you're talking about integration, it is not just about the billing system. Like we integrate with 23 billing systems across the world. So you have to have flexibility, standardization, and consistency with respect to the billing aspects of the utilities. And from the metering side, you have to integrate with the multiple providers like Brian. And we should be able to be interoperable. At the same time, we have to standardize our solutions, and we have to be flexible in such a way that legacy systems which are not capable of doing web services interactions, we should be able to provide them the flexibility of giving a file-based transactions, or having a different way of communicating with the systems, so that we reach our goal of unifying all the data points and presenting it something like Vidyut Pravah, where you have a single dashboard, single interface, and you can see what is happening in any corner of the world. So you have to be able to have data pipelines saying, this is the consumption, these are the problems this particular region is facing. So all this can be happening only if we have interoperability. Then we should have the scale, and we should also have security. So with to give a brief idea of what we do, we are basically the first prepayment solution provider. We operated, we have been in the business for the past 17 years, and we are #1 smart prepayment solution. Our solution, I don't call it as a technical solution or a billing solution or a prepaid solution. Rather, it is going to bridge the gap between financial aspects, behavioral aspects, and technical aspects of bringing all the meters, integrators, security, and billing systems together. That is what is my take, Mr. Saurabh Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasudhar. I think very important points, and a point that we will take it up for a larger discussion in the next half an hour that we have, is about the legacy billing systems and what do we do with them? How do we seamlessly integrate them? How do we upgrade them? That's something that we'll come back. But let me now. We have about half an hour before we take in questions from the audience, and what I would propose is that based on the initial remarks that all the panelists made, and also based on what we are trying to discuss, I'll try and put questions to each panelist for his intervention during this half an hour. And of course, I will direct the question to one of you at a time, but feel free, anybody else who wants to add after the speaker has said. So it's kind of a free-flowing discussion that we would like to do, with the aim to see what are the things that we need to really live up to the theme of adopt, accelerate, and transform in a manner of a limited time period that we have. So this was a question I was planning for Mr. Deekshit, who could not unfortunately join us. So let me turn to Anil, because he has been working with many distribution companies in India. Can you just share some insights for the panel and also for everyone who has been watching us live? What has been the results of the deployment of smart meters in certain states in terms of loss reduction, billing efficiency improvements, and maybe if you have data on how much during the pandemic has there been billing which has been done during the pandemic? So I over to you, Anil.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you. So if you allow me, I would like to bring out how this smart metering operates for the benefit of attendees and how it is different than the conventional setup. So once we know the whole process, it's easy to understand that how it benefits. So and I'll not take much of time. So if we see the conventional meter, we all know, we have been seeing since childhood in our compound, somebody visiting, and we have always been friendly with all the nice DISCOM guys who have been coming and collecting the meter reads. At times they have not been able to come, and then still the bill comes, and we wonder how the bill comes without the guy coming. And it's sometimes a provisional bill. So all these things we know very well since our childhood. But then how the world is changing when we say adapt, adopt, and accelerate. So this basically means that instead of a conventional meter, which actually measures the power being flowing, energy being flowing through the meter and going to the house, we have a meter which, in addition to capturing that, stores the data, can communicate, and can be switched on and off from a distance. So these are only few things which differentiate a normal meter and a smart meter, but that's where the whole crux of the things lie. If I have a smart meter, then my meter not only records but has a SIM card which can send signals to the digital backend for capturing the data, and has the relay which can be put on and off by distribution company, and has an app which is given to the consumer, which empowers the consumer in knowing what's happening to his meter. And so, as I said, in conventional time, we never knew why bill is so high and why bill is so low and why it could come without the meter reader being there. So all the questions are answered through the smart meter. So if you see in a smart meter process, the real meat lies in terms of the digital backend. You have to have a robust digital backend which actually smart meter can communicate. So as I normally say, smart metering is not about meter. Meter is an event. It's one-time event. It would be installed at your home, but it's about the smartness in the process. That smartness comes from the digital backend. So a robust digital backend connected to a meter at your home is all about this whole story. Now, how it helps the DISCOMs and what has been the response. So out of the meters which have been installed, and I really put all my credit all the time that ESL has done a groundbreaking work in really implementing one of the fastest set of meters. And I'll again digress here for half a second. I was talking to somebody a few days back, and the guy said, we are doing a big task in Australia. We are doing 4 lakh meters. And ESL has done this 10 lakh meters in recent small history, and we are targeting 1 lakh meter per day. And then I said Australia could be, or this place could be 4 days job for us. So that's a scale where we have been trying to implement, and the groundbreaking has done by ESL. Now how it has transformed the utilities. it has allowed, Mr. Saurabh Kumar said in the beginning that 17% is the average billing not happening and collection not happening, and that translates to a large money as he brought out. Then if you see a place like Uttar Pradesh, where we have implemented more than 10 lakh meters, I've been personally tracking how the meter reads are coming. We in recent, means a 15 or 5 days back, we were at 1.4% meters not reading. That basically means 98.6% billing efficiency being generated. So that itself shows how the transformation can, and I tell you 1.4% is not a happy state for us. We are targeting far, far lower. We are targeting 100% meter reads. And that's the transformation which we are talking about when we say adopt, accelerate, and transform. So as I said, that this process has enabled utilities to really reach out without physically being there and able to really collect their money, do the billing, and empowered the consumer also at the same time by the consumer being able to see what's being consumed and when it's being consumed. So this is the change which we are seeing. And coming to the recent situation, in these unfortunate times, as I said in the beginning, but every misfortune has some streak of brightness which has to be seen and captured. This we have this we have seen and captured, and the streak is that in these recent times when DISCOMs have been doing extremely good job. Let me tell you, I've never been complaining about my distribution system. I've been getting power in this COVID time. When I was afraid of even getting out in this COVID time, there was somebody who was working and I was getting power. Hats off to the distribution system and the people who have been working behind the curtains. But then they have not been able to collect. We all know that distribution companies have suffered because they could not bill, they could not collect, and that's very tough time. But this has not happened. I want to tell to all the people who are on this webinar, to the distribution companies and the areas where smart meters have been installed. We have seen more than 96%, as I said in my personal analysis, we've reached 98.4% billing and collection happening seamlessly. And in case of prepaid also regular prepaid recharging being happening. So that's a seamless cash flow in all situations happening compared to the areas where unfortunately smart meters were not there, provisional billing was done, that too in the range of 70-80%. So that's the gap. So that's the help which actually smart meters have reinforced their presence in these tough times. And that this cash flow, which is actually scarce in the recent times, has really helped utilities in really standing to the basics in terms of financing their operations. And when we talk about this kind of help which is being extended to distribution companies, we should remember that working capital in these times is even toughest. You're not getting working capital easily. The interest rates, and these are very natural situation. And if you have a cash flow which is sustained in these tough times, you are helped to that extent also. And then third thing, we should not forget, every life is precious. Going out to the houses and reading is not a fun. Getting power to me and I speaking on webinar is easy and a fun thing, but it's not easy for somebody to come and read it and risk concept. This has avoided all the safety issues, all the concerns coming out of the pandemic. And I feel personally very privileged to be part of a story which is actually helping people, helping DISCOMs, helping consumers, and helping this society and environment also in large way. And that has actually come out wide and open during this pandemic time. So that's my thought on that.
Thank you, Anil. I think very, very well said, presented. A, it helps DISCOMs like nothing else at this stage. B, if I may be allowed to say so, it is kind of COVID, it has all the ingredients which are needed to be COVID free. So what I'm going to do now is to ask a very important question which I had in mind on the communication to Mr. D'Souza. And right after that, I will request the organizers to put together and present the outcome of the poll that we started off with. And I'm sure after that, I'll take the outcomes of the poll to the other panelists. So, Mr. D'Souza, there has been a debate, raging debate, and I don't think it has still reached its conclusion on which communication technology to be used. I mean, you talked about in your opening that there's the need for security, the need for flexibility, interoperability, GPRS versus RF. These are the current two topics. So, Mr. D'Souza, what is it that you feel is the way forward, and what has been your experience around the world which can help a country like India, ESL, Brilliant, and IntelliSmart? Mr. D'Souza.
Sure. Sure. Thanks for that. So in fact, to a large extent, a lot of countries, when they did their first generation rollouts, they used RF, proprietary RF. But that's now changing as they move to second generation rollouts, or they're doing new rollouts itself. And the question as to why this is changing is important. The first is proprietary RF versus the massive scalability of cellular technology in terms of driving down costs is a world of a gap. Because in the cellular industry, you have thousands of companies working on new technologies, driving those costs and driving standardization. Whereas in RF, it's not the case, not to that extent. And this is the reason why the return on investment in the business models is changing for the utilities, with newer cellular communication coming in, like Cat-M, Cat-NB IoT. With this kind of thing, it's starting to make cellular communication cheaper, and you have the benefit of massive standardization and scale, which is really important for a country like India. And that's the first reason why people are actually moving towards cellular communication, even if they start off with RF. There's a second part that is more an operational question, which is that depending on the RF architecture, sometimes replacing a meter, whether it's to fix it or something else, because it's a mesh network, is not a simple thing of just taking one meter, plugging in a new one. Because it's in a mesh, sometimes not always, but sometimes the architecture is more complex, and saying, if I take out this meter, which other meters in the mesh do I impact? It's not a straight, depending on how the architecture is, it's not a straight question. And that drives up operational costs. Whereas cellular connected meters are point to point, directly from the meter to the backend, into the head-end system of Brilliant, carrying the data, sending it back. So if there's any problems that are out there, it's very easy to just replace one meter and you don't impact anything else. That also makes rollouts easier to handle, because one can, instead of, again, in an RF mesh, you need to plan in a zone, and all the nodes in the mesh need to be built together and synced up. You don't necessarily have that drawback with cellular metering, because you just put a cellular meter, you put a SIM card, you turn it on, you have the data that's going. So in that context, the return on investment, the total cost of ownership with the newer cellular technologies like Cat-NB IoT, Cat-M in Europe, are making cellular technology the preferred option. And there is a third element that is linked to that, and which is actually more linked to Cat-M than Cat-NB IoT. So Cat-M is one of the cellular technologies that has slightly higher bandwidth. And this is coming through mainly in the rollouts that are happening in Europe, which has to do with the energy transition towards renewable energy. And because of the transition towards renewable energy, you have different sources. Renewable sources are not constant like let's say coal or nuclear power. And because of that, there is a need to constantly measure the data from the meter to be able to manage grid stability. And that kind of data and information and how quickly the data is got drives towards using of cellular, but specifically Cat-M technology. And generally, these are the factors that are driving the move towards cellular communication.
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza. While I request the organizers to put up the results of the poll, I think I'll add to one more thing that you mentioned, is that there is a lot in it for the telecom companies as well. I will take the case of India. If there are 250 million consumers, data consumers, the revenue coming from these consumers is roughly $250 million US every year for life. So now the results of the poll are right here. An important factor for success of smart meter will be integration and interoperability. That's the highest. And the second is efficient regulatory reform. So let me turn to Brian. And Brian, Trilliant has been helping many utilities around the world on this. How important is integration and interoperability insofar as smart meter solutions are concerned? Brian.
Yeah, I think it's something that's often overlooked. The ability to not only integrate into systems, but be able to scale within those environments, and then be able to replicate into new environments. So we often talk about scalability, but I think what you saw here, in India in the initial deployment is not only is scalability important, but also is replicability, to be able to take that and put it into other environments and scale it up quickly. So that's something that I think part of that comes down to the integration capability. And when you've got so many different systems that integrate to, it's really important that it's done correctly, that testing is done appropriately from an end-to-end standpoint. And then on the other end of the equation is down at the end devices. And that's something that we have taken a bit of a different approach on. And being a communications company, we don't make any end devices. So our goal is to be able to connect to all the end devices that our utility partners or SI partners may choose. And so I think in ESL we have about 7 or 8 different meter types that are connected to our network. And across Asia we have 22 different meter types. And the value of that, there's security of supply, which I think we've seen over the past 3 months that we might not have expected. So there's big benefit in that. And then to be able to drive the cost down on the end devices is also key. But another key point is when you look at the number of devices, 250 million to be deployed here in 3 years, you're going to need a lot of vendors to be able to support that. There are a lot of meter vendors in India, and we want to be able to allow all of them the chance, to have equal opportunity to participate. So if you have to be able to integrate efficiently and effectively to give everybody a fair chance at meeting this ambitious goal.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I think absolutely valid points and very important for at least me and Anil as we move ahead into the next phase of the rollout. So let me ask the same question to Mr. Vasudha, and from the perspective which is the tail end of the I would say the entire integration, and perhaps the most important one in terms of from the DISCOM perspective is the integration, standardization of the legacy billing system. There are systems that and you've worked with multiple utilities. There are homegrown systems, there are systems on SAP, there are systems on many other platforms. What is it that can be done, particularly when the pace is going to be much quicker, to make sure that Anil is able to reach billing efficiency levels of nearly 100%? Mr. Vasudha.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question, Mr. Kumar. So integration from the standpoint, you cannot basically come and see a new smart meter or new technology coming up and then you have to integrate. That is going to be that is reasonably difficult when you're talking about the scale of 250 million smart meters. What you can do is you have existing integrations with different file systems, different web services. So you can bring in the best practice and say, okay, these are the expectations from a smart meter rollout perspective. And if we can basically collaborate. It is not like you give me a standardization and I basically run behind trying to implement how these two systems are going to talk. So, for example, Trilliant, we have integrations. We have multiple integrations with other vendors. So the moment we know, it will be easier for us to integrate with the existing systems, and we can also standardize in a way that the new system is not going to be radically different from the existing systems. All are going to be somewhat similar, because we are essentially talking about different billing determinants and quality parameters, power factor. So one is with respect to what your experience has been with the previous integrations. Second, what is the best way for you to integrate? These are the things that we need to keep in mind before we start talking about 250 million smart meter rollout. So whatever the learnings we had in the past, they become extreme to bring a successful rollout, because entire world is basically looking at us right now. 250 million. Nobody ever. I mean, to be honest, it is hard for us to count the number of zeros in 250 million. So in such a scenario, what we can do is we bring, okay, these are the pros and cons of previous integrations. So we bring in that, and we basically do our best to implement it in a fast rollout. That is basically what is my take on integration aspects.
Excellent point, Mr. Basudhar. Excellent point. Yes, you can't certainly, none of us at this point in time can count the number of zeros, but if you just look at it, it's only a quarter of a billion, which is fine. We can manage. But yeah, so let me now turn to the next question, and which I wanted to, because now we have about 10 minutes left, and there was the poll said the second important thing, and by the way, we'll have another poll just before we get into the question answer session and we have lots of questions that have already come up. So the second thing that was said after standardization was regulatory reforms. Now, I was wondering what could that be, and Anil, any thoughts on what are the regulatory reforms being talked about, particularly in the smart metering sector? Anil?
Very interesting. I must say that 10 days have really done good job in rightly categorizing the requirements 1 and 2, and I agree. So what has enabled the conventional metering and distribution billing collection mechanism, I'm talking about the regulation, may not be best when it comes to smart metering. It's not that it's because there's a word smart attached with the meter, it becomes any, it requires very different regulation. But then we may have to understand that some of the parameters of, or some of the clauses, or some of the areas of regulation which were actually required to be there because there was a physical intervention and it mattered, right? Exactly, that's something which has been removed from the picture now. As I said, smart metering is having two words, smart and meter, and meter is an event, smartness is a process. So whereas earlier it was only meter and it was a process and event both. Why? Because I have not only installed, I'm visiting it monthly, and I have to protect it from various aspects, and I have to have checks of various ways. For example, they say sealing is most important thing. You have to seal the meter, which is very, very valid. And we know there used to be seal in our conventional meter. Now, even if I seal the digital meter even 20 times, actually it doesn't matter anything, because what plays into the digital meter is something from the back end. I can still play with the digital meter and temper it and manipulate it the way I want without actually sealing and breaking the seal. So that makes it non-contextual in the situation. What I was trying to say, when the meter is there, it's a process and event both, and the regulations were there to cover both parts. Now the same regulation cannot apply to a situation which is only event, once a life event. So rest of it is outside that event. So some of the regulation which were actually working on the process part of the conventional meter are really not required anymore. And probably even if they are required, they need to really be improved or improvised in a manner that they look at the digital side of it. And that's where almost all the regulators and DISCOMs are sensitive to it. But regulatory reforms are always a small journey, and they have to be done with lots of caution around, and that work is really happening.
Thank you, Anil, and I think you really pointed out what is needed, and possibly that is what was there in many people who voted for this to be. So let me turn to both Mr. D'Souza and Brian. As Anil says, all these regulations, and meter in India is a regulated asset because simply it was a billing unit for the distribution company as much as the consumers also needed to know. Therefore, you needed a meter of a particular size to be put at a place where can be easily visible to people and should be tamper-proof, and therefore you need seals. In this world of smart meter, why do you need such detailed regulations? I mean, we all pay our telecom bills, we all pay our mobile bills. We never have to do anything like this. Is there a regulatory change that you've seen in other places where smart meter rollout has happened, or what has been your experience, Brian, to begin with you in various projects that you've done around the world?
Yeah, I think you can, if you take the last few months and look at that as an example of what has happened and what it's brought to light, I think is pretty interesting. So, you know, the last few months have been very difficult, but I think it's highlighted the need for digitization within the electricity sector, which is one of the most critical sectors, you know, of an economy. And you've seen over these few months, a lot of consumers have been flooding social media with complaints, and complaints mainly on spikes in their bills. And that's been driven primarily because of the inability to go physically read the meters where you don't have smart meters. And that's resulted in, you know, bills that are based on estimated usage instead of actual usage. And if you think about it, you know, I'd challenge you to think of anywhere else in your daily life that you pay for something based on estimated usage instead of actual usage. It's hard to think of anything that you pay, you know, in that way. And in addition, you know, it's really shocking that in this day and age where we have nearly ubiquitous connectivity and multiple connectivity options, that utilities are still relying on sending a person to every single home every single month to take the manual readings of electricity consumption. But the pandemic has really highlighted these challenges. They're relying on manual processes composed to consumers, and I think as a result, the regulators are taking note, the providers are, the consumers are taking note, and they're beginning to see the importance of digitizing the experience. I think it's, you know, it's late in many parts of the world, and I have to remember there are a lot of parts of the world that have done smart metering at large scale, but I think around Asia Pacific it varies, but very few countries have done this at a very large scale. But you also have to remember it's more than just automating the reading. You know, it opens the door to provide so much value to all the parties that are involved. So the, you know, consumers will be able to see their usage, you know, which they haven't been able to see in the past, and they'll be able to use that information to make decisions to reduce their bills. They'll have better ways to pay their bills, more ways to pay their bills, including mobile apps, etc. And it also opens a door to provide additional value-added services on top of this platform that's being put in place for smart metering. So you can only imagine what the possibilities are going to be over time. So I think this has highlighted some of the missing pieces and the reason that the regulators need to get behind this. Smart metering is really just the gateway to customer empowerment and many different offerings that are going to be able to be provided to customers because of this foundational element.
Thanks, Brian. Same question to you, Mr. D'Souza. Is it now time to really denotify smart meter as a regulated asset?
So in fact, yeah. So what have regulators done elsewhere? And it's been a learning journey, and I think EESL, especially in the way you build your business model and the approach, is kind of, let's say, jump the curve in a way. But people who went through the process in a let's say some time ago started off with the same regulation for normal meters, but realized that it was not allowing the scale and the benefit of smart metering to come in. And there were less onerous regulation now on the process itself of the meter reading, etc. And the focus of regulation was more around towards getting consumer benefit and ensuring data privacy and security. And then, of course, the cybersecurity for the entire grid itself. So it was, I wouldn't call it regulation, it's more specifications, but there were standards that were set more for that. And going back to what Brian said and what Anil said before, it's really the focus towards moving to a digital infrastructure. And what does that do for the consumer? Be it in terms of the consumer having instant access to the data, be it in terms of making easy for the consumer to change their own habits, be it in terms of consumers being able to pay. And the focus has been more on that than on the infrastructure itself, except for the elements around the privacy and data security, where there has been specific cybersecurity mandates in a lot of countries, this being critical infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza. Mr. Vasudha, you have helped many utilities around the world to go to prepaid smart meters. And that is what now the government's sole directive as far as the smart meters are concerned. What are the regulatory changes or the best practices that you can tell us and tell whosoever is hearing us that we could integrate in whatever we are trying to do as far as the prepaid smart meter rollout is concerned? Mr. Vasudha.
So, Saurabh Kumar, what basically regulator wants to have see the balance between the financial aspects of the utility and all the and the consumer. So they are basically the level players who keep both parties happy. So what we as a leader in prepayment solution did is we brought in engagement solutions to the end customers. So somebody may not be having smartphone, so we will basically send them SMSs and different way of communicating with them so that they know when what their balances are and when they have to recharge in order to keep the lights up. And we also ensure that we are not pressurizing them in a binary way of current situation where if you have to pay 100% of the amount or you will be disconnected. Instead, you will convert them to like an installment based payment solution where your debt recovery or write-offs will be reduced. I mean, your debt recovery rate will increase and write-offs will reduce. What we have seen is like 72% of our write-offs have reduced, which basically keeps the utilities happy. And from the end user perspective, what happens is since they are not disconnected, they will be more loyal and they will be more happy to pay whatever they can afford more frequently to the utility. So when the consumers and the utilities are going and saying, I want a smart meter, I want flexibility in making the payments, regulator will also be happy because that is basically the essential job. So we are doing the job of regulator in balancing the happiness coefficient of utilities and the end consumers.
Thank you, Mr. Vasudha. I think it has been a very engaging discussion. Unfortunately, I'm completely out of time in this segment, and and we have plenty of questions that are pouring in from all that are watching us. But before we get into the segment of question and answer, can we pause for a while and do the second poll that we have promised? So can I request the organizers to put the second poll in, and which one of the following is not recommended as a cybersecurity best practices in smart metering: using keys and encryption, update keys independent of meter or hidden system, ensuring secured and signed firmware updates, using proprietary security algorithm, something that all the panelists felt is a very important aspect of data security that we need to bring in. So we'll just pause for a couple of maybe 10-15 seconds for people to respond, and maybe after 10 minutes into the question, and in fact when we finish the question and answer, I will again request Ashley and her team to please put out the results of the poll so that at the closing session we can possibly talk to our panelists. So just a couple of seconds and we get back. Okay, thank you. We have a large number of questions. I thought that I would possibly escape being asked a question being a moderator, but unfortunately not. But nevertheless, let me begin with those questions which are directed towards the panelists, and I'll take this question to Brian. And the question says, is there an easy way to test scalability of AMI systems?
There are a couple of ways to do it. There is a somewhat easy way, and just using tools. There are some pretty effective tools where you can, in a lab environment, you can measure scalability, and that's a good place to start. But I think most people that have been through this would agree the best way to test scalability is in a real deployment. When you're using the devices in the way that you would use them in the field, when you're seeing, the unplanned, like multiple events coming in from the meters that you might not have anticipated. So the best way, there are multiple ways to test scalability in a lab, and I recommend that all of those are done. But the best way is to test it, at scale in the field. And that doesn't mean that you have to test it in every new deployment or every new country. I think you can go look at those different types of solutions that have been built to scale in multiple environments, as I mentioned before, to get a feel for how they're going to behave in your specific environment.
Thank you. This is a question directed to Anil. Anil, the question is IntelliSmart only looking at consumers, or you're also looking at DT meters and later on into a smart grid? What is your vision for this?
Sorry, I missed the only consumer or? Sorry.
No, the question is that is IntelliSmart only focusing on consumer meters, or it will also look at DT metering and other things that are contribute to smart grid?
Okay. Yeah. So the focus remains to be consumer meters for the reason of the complexity of the whole task and our readiness towards that. But since we are open to many more things going forward, there are all opportunities we would like to take.
Okay, thank you. Now my next question is to Mr. Vasudhar, and just give me a minute to pick up that question directed towards you. As the lead in one of the largest and most successful prepaid deployments in the US, which currently has over 25,000 consumers in a software-based system, one of our key challenges was designing business processes for seamless customer interaction and customer education. How would you solve these issues in the Indian context? And I'll first request Mr. D'Souza and then Mr. Vasudhar to comment on this.
Sure.
Sorry, I just lost you for a second, Mr. Kumar. I just missed the beginning of the question.
So the question reads, as the lead in one of the largest and most successful prepaid deployments in the US, which currently has 25,000 consumers in a software-based system, one of the key challenges was designing a business process for seamless customer interaction and customer education. How would you solve these issues in Indian context?
Well, I think, to be honest, probably Mr. Vasundhar is better equipped to answer that than me. But I think in the specifically what one needs to ensure is trust with the consumer, because we have seen this with some utilities where there is a consumer facing app that's available where the consumer can see their usage, etc. And this was actually for water, okay, not for electricity. And because the communication was not resilient enough on the meter, you actually had people turn on the taps in the home, go into their app, see their reading and see that it wasn't changing because they were expecting it to be in real time, and then calling up the call center and complaining about it. And so it was water, not electricity. And obviously in this entire system, there was some kind of a flaw in setting up what the consumer expectations were, and also in the kind of technology that was also used for the communication. And I think one of the elements that would need to be done is to figure out what is the business aspect and what is the aspect that is communicated to consumers of the benefit of the smart meter, and then having that linked into the backend technology is going to be key, because otherwise we might set up expectations that are not what the system is built for. And I would hand over to Vasundhara to add.
Thank you, Francis. So one key element of the US deployments we have and Indian deployments that are going to be is with respect to smart mobile penetration. So let me take back and before answering that question, since EESL is in mode and you already started signing the MOUs with the gas utilities. We do this with water, gas, and electricity. The way we operate is we provide the mobile applications, we provide the web applications, and because of our population being not so well educated, we also do IVR calls. We send SMSs, and people can call in and say, okay, what is my balance? And IVR will respond saying, this is your balance, this is how long it is going to last. And because everything is smart, and as Mr. Anil Raval said, meter is only event and might basically lives on the server. Imagine my grandmother is sitting in some village which is quite far and she's not tech savvy or anything. As a grandson, I can recharge her smart gas or electric utilities, and she'll be happy. She basically will be able to understand the numbers, how much is the balance, and that aspect of interacting in Indian customers is going to change. And one more aspect with respect to prepay, as I mentioned before, is engaging the customer to say, okay, you have to be vigilant of your consumption. You have to be power aware through mobile applications, web applications, constant touch points like SMS and IVR saying, this is what it is going to be. Then people will be ready instead of somebody saying, Mera bijli tez chal rahi hai. That is not something we want to give in terms of setting the expectation to the end consumer. We have to say that, okay, this is what your electricity consumption has been, and if you continue to use it, this is what it is going to be in the next 1 week, so that you can go back and recharge or make the payments in whatever flexible format you want. That is how the engagement model will be slightly different from the US model. So.
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza and Mr. Vasudha. Completely agree. I mean, consumer face is the most important as we get into. So let me quickly take two questions together, and I'll pose one to Anil and the other to Brian. And this is a question first to Anil. What are the societal challenges you foresee in implementing a nationwide rollout of this program? Anil.
Right. So society is a very wide context, and obviously we all make together society. So first, I would say is that the mindset, right, which Mr. Saurabh Kumar referred to in the beginning, that we may have to get out of the mindset that power is free. So that's the biggest challenge. We have to realize that power is not free, right? And that's a big one question in the way of user charges on power. What smart metering is doing is making the user charges realization easy, empower DISCOM and consumer to know and translate into real life in terms of their expenses, and for DISCOM in terms of the collection. It is not making power free. It's only making it reasonably cheaper by being more efficient. It is making it more sustainable by reducing footprint of carbon. It's making it more friendly in terms of knowing and transparent. So that's the biggest challenge as society. I feel that we need to get out of the thinking that while we could be empowered, we may not be cheated, we cannot be overcharged. My meter cannot cheat me. At the same time, I should be open to paying what I'm using, and that's the biggest challenge in power sector.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, it's not free. You have to pay to use. You know it transparently. Brian, I mean, you have dealt with at least 3 or 4 distribution companies in India. up until now. What are the challenges that you've seen so far, and what would you recommend us to think of before we move on to the next DISCOM?
What to think of before moving to the next DISCOM?
Yes.
I think you guys made a smart move in taking a pause. If you remember the conversation that we had about 8 months ago, when you were moving really fast and you were ready to take on more DISCOMs, and I remember you said we're gonna stop and we're gonna sharpen the saw a little bit and get our processes in place. And when we hit 1 million meters, then we'll have our processes nailed down. Then we'll be ready to expand. And I think that was a really good decision, because anytime that you're starting a program like this, and you started from scratch, and then you reached 1 million meters faster than anybody else in the world has ever done. And I think that's just remarkable, and kudos to all of you and your team for doing that. But now I think you've got the processes in place, and I think the key going forward is going to be to replicate as much as possible and reduce the variables. The more variables that you can control and you can stabilize going into the next DISCOM, the less unknowns that you're going to have, and the less chance of surprises. So I would say, standardize everything that you can, cut and paste and repeat where possible is going to be the best way to reduce the complexities and help with your ability to meet these aggressive timelines. And then I think the other thing that I must mention is, all of these big smart metering deployments, they never happen at scale without getting the consumers on board and without delivering measurable benefits to consumers. And I think that that's something that you've done a very nice job of, is articulating those benefits. And it's key to focus on the consumers and show the benefits that we're delivering to them, so that they're asking for smart metering and they're pulling for it versus it being pushed on them. And that cannot be overlooked, as the consumer engagement.
Thanks, Brian. We have a couple of more minutes in this round, and it'll be unfair on my part because there are certain questions directed to me. So let me try and answer them. One is on the energy efficiency and can it not be regulated? Let me mention energy efficiency. Certain aspects of it are certainly regulated under the Energy Conservation Act. And there are 3 regulated energy efficiency parts. One is for standards and labeling. You see the 5-star label on air conditioners, on refrigerators. So that's the part of the first regulation. The second is building codes. The buildings have to be energy efficient. That has been regulated by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And the third is a scheme called Perform, Achieve and Trade, where identified large industries have been given targets for energy efficiency. So yes, it is a regulated work. And then there's a whole set of questions on where will the meters come from, how much will be the local content, what has ESL done to a particular company which has been in the news recently. Very quickly, in 30 seconds, look, we are an apolitical business professional organization. What we are doing right now is to figure out which of our suppliers, including those of smart meters and lighting, how much localized content they have of the finished product. It is not driven by anything that we are hearing across. It's a very simple thing. We don't know how this pandemic will pan out. We don't know which parts of the world will get locked down and when. When will the transportation and supply disruption happen? So we're just trying to make sure that if we have promised 2 million meters to, let's say, a particular DISCOM, I should be in a position to know which all sources I need to put up. And that's the whole thing that we are doing. We are very sure that India has the capability the Indian manufacturers have the capability to provide smart meters. We already do 60 to 70 million electronic meters every year. So there is no reason to believe that there will be any problems in that. So let me, at this point in time, I must thank everyone for excellent discussion and all your contributions today. I know we still have more questions, but I would prefer, I would suggest the organizers, they can They can send us the questions to all the panelists, and maybe in a predefined time period, we could put all the answers together and send it out to all who have joined us today. So at this point in time, let me request Ashley and her team to put out the second results of the poll so that we can have a short discussion on this. So clearly, one of the things on security is using proprietary security algorithms, and the second one is update is independent of meter or headend system type. Now, honestly speaking, I'm not a technical expert on this. So can I go back to my panel and a 1 minute possibly reactions on each one of you on this board?
Sure.
Who want to go first?
So I could.
Yeah.
So in fact, absolutely, the audience, 50% of them got it right, saying security proprietary algorithms, and that's absolutely right. And why? It's because when you have standardized algorithms, these have been tested and are continuously being tested for hacks by millions of researchers around the world. And the moment they find there's a flaw in an algorithm, it's immediately updated. But a proprietary algorithm, which typically when used in security, because everybody thinks proprietary is safer, but when you use a proprietary algorithm, if it's hacked once, that's 250 million meters out there that will actually be at risk, and it's very difficult to patch it over the air because you don't have people working on these algorithms. So therefore, in a smart meter, that's one.
Sorry, we have just a minute left, and I like 30 seconds from Brian, Vasudha, and Anil. Very quickly, just 30 seconds, one line on this.
I would second what Mr. Francis said. Is it's important from a security perspective to leverage leverage the industry standards and all the organizations and testing and investment that goes into those standards.
Thanks, Anil. One line.
So yeah, we are very conscious of this fact, and we are going beyond the government given standards to really go deeper into and see all the best possible measures are taken on.
Thank you. Mr. Vasudha, 30 seconds.
So they basically says interoperability, whether it is with the integration of the systems or with the security aspects. Open standards are extremely important for us to be more secure. That is what poll results essentially mean.
Thank you. I think the people's voice, which is in this case the two polls, actually sums up today's discussion. If you look at 4 keywords, we need standardization, we need interoperability, we need flexibility, we need scale, and we need to be conscious of the fact that we have to be consumer centric. So let me thank everyone, Brian, Anil, Vasudha, and Mr. D'Souza for joining us today. Let me also thank all the audience who participated very well and asked very, very important questions. Let me hand it back to Armandeep for the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. We'd like to extend a very big thank you to our expert panel for collaborating with us on this very insightful session on smart metering. Mr. Surab Kumar, Mr. Anil Rawal, Mr. Brian Spear, Mr. Francis D'Souza, and Mr. Vasunda Buddapati, many thanks for joining us today. Another big thank you to Energy Efficiency Services Limited for their support as co-organizer and also being an apex body in smart metering deployment. Much thanks to our webinar partners, Thales Group and Acceleron Software for their support and involvement as speakers. Last but not least, thank you to all of the lovely audience members for joining us today and for your active participation. We hope that you enjoyed the session as much as we did. We will make sure that we share the responses from the expert panel to all of the questions that we were unable to respond to today due to time constraints. Before you sign off, we would like you to stay back and enjoy a short video on our upcoming event, Indian Utility Week and Distributech India 2020, co-located with the 17th edition of PowerGen India. We look forward to welcoming you in our next session. Till then, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.